"Stand back from him, he'll take your hand off," the girl said, stepping past the Duke of Sternemoor as though he were a stable lad, and Jasper forgot, for a moment, every reason he had come. He had come quietly, in a plain brown coat and rougher boots than he ever wore, with no servant and no crest on the gig he had hired at the posting inn. The great black stallion in the squire's stable was said to be the finest in the county and the most savage, and Jasper, who knew horses better than he knew men, had wished to judge it for himself before any bargain was struck, and to be, for a few days, simply a man who knew horses, rather than the Duke of Sternemoor with 3 matchmaking mothers laying siege to his peace. No one at the squire's modest establishment knew him. He had given the name Jasper Low, which was true enough as far as it went, and been taken for a gentleman's agent come to look at the horse, and shown to the stables, and left there. And there he had found her. Frances Holt moved among the stalls in a worn apron and a faded print gown, her sleeves pushed up, a wisp of fair hair fallen loose across a cheek smudged with dust. She was the squire's daughter, he gathered, one of several, the plain quiet middle one, the one who was no trouble and therefore largely forgotten, who had taken to the stables because the horses did not care whether a girl was pretty or accomplished or likely to marry well. She went to the black stallion stall now, the very horse 3 grooms had warned Jasper would kill a careless man, and she set her hand flat against the door and spoke to it low, and the savage beast came and put its great head down into her palm like a lamb. Jasper had been struck by many fine things in his life. He could not remember being struck quite like this. "You have a way with him," he said. "He has a way with people who don't shout," she answered, not turning. "Most men shout at what frightens them. He frightens easily, for all his size. So do most things that look fierce." She glanced back then, and seemed to take Jasper improperly for the first time, the plain coat, the quiet manner, and something in her wary face east. "You're the agent come about the sale. You'll want to see his paces. I'll bring him out, but you'll let me handle him if you've any sense." "I have some," Jasper said gravely. "Lead on." So she led the stallion out into the yard, and Jasper watched her handle a horse that better men feared, and he found that he was watching her far more than the animal. There was a competence in her, unfussed honest skill, that he had met in no drawing-room. She did not simper or angle for his good opinion. She did not know he had a good opinion worth angling for. She spoke to him as one sensible person to another about hocks and wind and temperament, and when he made a remark that showed he knew his subject, she looked at him with a flash of real pleasure, as though glad to find someone who understood, and that flash undid him more thoroughly than any practiced charm could have. He stayed 3 days. He told himself it was the horse. The horse was indeed magnificent, and the bargain not yet struck, and a careful man took his time. But he knew, by the second morning, that he was lingering for the stable yard, and the worn apron, and the quiet girl who spoke to frightened things without shouting. He came down each day in his plain coat and helped her with the work, mucking and grooming and walking the horses out, his hands roughening, his fine manners set aside, and she came to expect him and to talk to him, the careful guarded talk of a girl who had learned not to hope for much, opening by slow degrees. He had not done an honest hour's labor with his own hands in years, and he found, to his surprise, that he liked it, the warmth of the beasts, the smell of straw and leather, the simple satisfaction of a stall mucked clean and a coat brushed to a shine. More than that, he liked the company. Frances did not chatter to fill a silence. When she spoke it was because she had something to say, and what she said was always her own, never borrowed from any drawing-room script. She corrected him once, gently, on the handling of a nervous mare, and was right, and did not apologize for being right, and Jasper, who had not been corrected by anyone on anything in the whole proud course of his dukedom, found that he wanted to laugh aloud for the sheer relief of it. Here at last was a person who did not measure her words to flatter him, because she did not know there was anything to flatter. She liked him or she did not, on his own plain merits, and the not knowing whether she liked him kept him awake at night in a way no certainty ever had. She told him on the third evening, leaning on the paddock rail in the gold of the setting sun, a little of her life. The mother dead, the father kind but vague, the prettier sisters who had the season, and the gowns and the suitors, while Frances was left to be useful. "I don't mind it," she said, and almost meant it. "The horses are better company than most of the gentlemen who come courting Anne and Maria. They at least are honest about what they are." She glanced sidelong at him. "You're honest. That's rare in my small experience. Most men who come here are forever pretending to be grander than they are." Jasper, who was pretending to be a great deal less than he was, felt the words go into him like a small clean blade. "And if a man were the other way about," he asked, before he had decided to, "pretending to be less than he is?" She considered it, watching the horses in the gold light. "Then I'd want to know why," she said, "and whether the man underneath was worth the trouble of the pretending, but I'd not hold the pretending against him. We all of us hide what we must to get a little peace." She smiled, unaware how near the bone she had cut. "Even stable girls have their disguises, Mr. Lowe. This apron is one of mine. In it, no one asks me why I am not married." He should have told her then. He knew it. But he was a coward in this one thing, as men of great consequence often are when they meet, late and unlooked for, the one person who likes them for nothing they own. And he was afraid, plainly afraid, that the moment she knew him for the Duke of Sternemoor, the easy, honest girl at the paddock rail would vanish, and a wary stranger would curtsy in her place, and he would never get her back. So he said nothing that third evening, and the next morning the thing he had dreaded came of its own accord. A carriage rolled into the squire's yard, a grand one, crested, with outriders. Jasper, crossing from the stable with a bridle over his shoulder and straw on his sleeves, stopped dead. His own steward climbed down, hat in hand, and bowed very low, and said in a voice that carried the length of the yard, "Your Grace, forgive the intrusion, but the matter at the North Farms cannot wait, and the household did not know where you had gone." The yard went silent. The squire, hurrying out, stopped and gaped. The grooms stared, and Frances Holt, leading the black stallion to the trough, went perfectly still, the rope slack in her hand. Jasper set down the bridle. There was nothing for it now. He drew himself up, and the plain agent in the brown coat was gone, and the Duke of Sternemoor stood in the stable yard, the same man and yet entirely changed, the bearing he had set aside settling back over him like a mantle. He saw the squire begin to stammer and bow. He had eyes only for the girl by the trough. She was looking at him with an astonishment that slowly, terribly, cooled into something else, understanding, and behind it a deep quiet hurt. She let the rope fall. She gathered the worn skirts of her print gown and dropped a curtsy, low and correct and final, exactly the curtsy he had feared. "Your Grace," she said, "forgive me. I did not know." And she turned to go. Frances. He crossed the yard in long strides, careless of the watching servants, careless of everything. "Frances, wait, please." She stopped, but did not turn. "There's nothing to wait for, Your Grace," she said, low. "You've had your jest. The stable girl who didn't know a duke when she shod his horse. You may dine out on it a twelvemonth." It was never a jest. He came round to face her, and there in the morning yard, before his own steward and the gaping squire, the Duke of Sternemoor stood with straw on his sleeves and his heart in plain sight. "I came in a brown coat, because I was sick to death of being the Duke of Sternemoor, of women who saw the title and never the man, of mothers who would have sold me their daughters for the coronet. I wanted 3 days as no one, and I found you." His voice dropped. "You spoke to me as though I were worth speaking to for myself. You said honesty was rare, and you were right, and I was a coward not to give you mine. But everything else I gave you was true, Frances. Every word in that stable. I did not pretend to admire you. I did not pretend to want to be where you were. I have not wanted to be anywhere else in 3 days." She looked up at him, the hurt still in her face but something fighting it now. "You are a duke," she said, as though that settled all the world, "and I muck out stables." "You gentle horses that grown men fear," he said, "you speak the truth to a stranger's face. You are kinder and braver, and a great deal more honest than the whole of the society that has been throwing its daughters at me for 10 years, and not one of those daughters ever once made me wish to be a better and a plainer man. You did. In 3 days, in a stable yard, you did." He took her dusty hand, there before everyone, and held it as though it were the finest thing in the county, which to him it was. "I do not want a duchess who was raised to want my title. I want the girl at the paddock rail who liked me when I had nothing. Marry me, Frances Holt. Let me be Jasper Low to you in private all the rest of my life, and the Duke of Sternemoor only when the world requires it. I have never in my life been so certain of anything." The yard held its breath. The squire had stopped stammering. The black stallion, untended, lipped quietly at the trowel. And Frances Holt, the overlooked middle daughter who spoke to frightened things without shouting, looked into the face of the man she had lost her heart to before she ever knew his name, and found that the face had not changed at all, that the quiet, honest man of the stables was there still, looking out at her from beneath the title, asking. "The man underneath," she said slowly, the ghost of her old smile returning. "I said I'd want to know whether he was worth the trouble of the pretending." "And is he?" Jasper asked. He, the Duke of Sternemoor, feared and courted and never once chosen for himself, waited on a stable girl's word as he had never waited on anything. "He is," she said softly. "He was worth it from the first morning. I only wish you had trusted me sooner, Jasper. I would not have curtsied at all." He laughed then, low and glad and free, and raised her dusty hand to his lips in the gold morning light, and the watching yard let out its breath at last. They were married before the year was out, the squire's forgotten daughter and the great Duke of Sternemoor, and the black stallion came to Sternemoor with them, for Frances would not be parted from him. She gentled half the county's horses in the years that followed, and a good many of its proud people besides, and her husband, who had gone among strangers in a brown coat to escape being wanted for his title, spent the rest of his life being wanted by her for nothing but himself. "You found me when I was no one," he said to her once, the two of them in the Sternemoor stables at dusk, her hand in his work-roughened one and his signet ring warm between their fingers. "I have spent every day since giving thanks that you did. I was a duke who had never once been chosen. You chose the stranger in the stable, Frances, and in choosing him, you gave me the only thing my title never could. You gave me a heart that wanted me, and only me, and I shall cherish it, and you, for the whole of my life." And Frances Holt, who had thought herself fit only for company of horses, leaned against the shoulder of the Duke, who had come to her in disguise and stayed for love, and knew herself, at the last, the most cherished woman in all his great and gilded world.